Hey everybody, Trey here. Welcome back to another forecast discussion. We've got another round of severe weather on tap for today for much of Texas. We've got an enhanced risk out for basically the Red River down to the south, including the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area, the I-35 corridor down toward Waco, Round Rock, Georgetown, and Austin, just on the southern end of that enhanced risk, as well as for areas out to the west, basically places like Abilene, Brady, Brownwood. You're in the enhanced risk as well. Then we have a broad slight risk surrounding that goes all the way out to eastern New Mexico. Places kind of along the I-27 corridor that were impacted yesterday, places like Plainview, Lubbock, out to the west toward Morton, Leveland, Littlefield. You are in the slight risk out there, could be impacted by storms this afternoon as well. Places like Midland, Odessa as well. And the slight risk does extend to the south towards San Antonio and the Houston, Galveston area. So very complex setup for today. Going to be multiple rounds of severe weather. There is going to be a tornado threat with these storms, 5% area outlined by the SPC for basically southern Oklahoma, southwest Arkansas, western Louisiana, down back into Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth, Waco, Austin, toward Abilene. You are in that 5% area as well. I think the main threat today is going to be damaging winds. That damaging wind threat, 30% area, does encompass that enhanced risk area for the same areas. And then there will be a large hail threat, particularly out toward the west as storms first form, including places like Midland, Odessa, Abilene, San Angelo. You are in that kind of most heightened hail threat for today, including the threat for significant hail. So all severe hazards on the table. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we are seeing and kind of take you through what all these different areas might see with today's event. So this is our satellite imagery, and you can see very clearly what's going to be our driver for today's event. This trough, this swirl in the flow here, kind of centered over southern Colorado, northern New Mexico, that is going to continue to initiate storms or help initiate storms this afternoon and evening. And I say continue to do so because there's a big area of storms that's impacting parts of northwest and northern Texas into central Oklahoma. If we take a look at our radar this morning, you can see that MCS, basically the conglomeration of storms from last night, has moved off and is continuing to produce impactful weather this morning. Just had the squall line move through here in Norman a few minutes ago. But here's our MCS moving through parts of northwest Texas into north Texas, approaching the I-35 corridor right now. This is the WinStar Casino right in there, Thackerville. I-35 corridor in here. So Dallas-Fort Worth may be impacted by storms here in the next hour or so, perhaps even by the time you're watching this video. But places like Denton, Gainesville are about ready to be impacted by strong storms. These are not severe at this point, but may produce some gusty winds and some very heavy rain, lightning, and thunder. But this is going to be our first round. That's going to move off toward the east as we go through the morning hours today. Then we're going to get renewed storm development back out to the west, kind of on the western portion of that enhanced risk area and into that slight risk area as well. So we'll take a look at our visible satellite here just to show you where kind of the clearing is. Basically, this MCS and northward into Oklahoma, they're basically socked in clouds at this point. Whereas to the south, we've got areas of clearing down here. And something interesting to note, you can see these kind of gravity waves emanating from this MCS. That's associated with the outflow from this convective system. So we may have a boundary or two to deal with today down here. So that outflow boundary may stall here and become a focus for afternoon severe thunderstorm development, as is often the case with these morning MCSs. So we'll have to keep that in mind, but very kind of cool satellite imagery here. You can see those gravity waves emanating from that MCS. So let's take a look at our upper air maps here. This is at 500 millibars, so about 18,000 feet off the ground. You can see this trough, this circulation is trying to close off here over Colorado. I think in the next couple of hours, we should see this circulation close off and start to intensify a little bit, start to become a little bit more negatively tilted, which is a little bit more favorable for impactful severe weather, although positively tilted troughs produce severe weather all the time, but negatively tilted troughs mean that they're very much mature and kind of ready to produce that severe weather. This is going to close off and again become negatively tilted through the afternoon hours today. And you can see we've got a little shortwave here that may be a little bit convectively enhanced, but it is helping to continue these storms off into the morning hours. It is kind of extending maybe a separate little wave down here across far southern Texas into the Gulf of Mexico. There is an area of showers and storms that's moving off toward the north that may impact places like Houston and Galveston this morning. Sub-severe storms at that. But as we go through the afternoon hours, we're going to see the brunt of this trough move into the places like West Texas, and that is going to be the main initiator for severe storms this afternoon. Let's go down to 700 millibars here, a little lower in the atmosphere. We can really pinpoint these short waves rotating around the main wave. You can see one here, kind of one that's kind of in there, maybe one that's a little bit in here. We're looking for, again, these kinks in the contours here. These little sort of engines that help drive more focused areas of severe thunderstorm development within this sort of broad scale troughing that helps the large scale lift for storms later on. Maybe a little one back in here as well, but these kind of just sort of minor shortwaves may help this afternoon initiate focused areas of severe thunderstorms. We'll go down to 850 millibars here. Low-level jet is in place across the southern plains from basically east central Kansas down through central Oklahoma, extending kind of back into West Texas here. So low-level jet is in place. With this trough, this 500 millibar trough, ejecting into the plains, we're going to see westerly flow across the Rockies. So we may get renewed lee cyclogenesis here to the lee of the Rockies. Again, that's when sort of you have flow that traverses the Rockies, and we can go through the science of it, but basically you get a surface low as a result on the east side of the Rockies. So we saw that yesterday. We may get renewed development today of that surface low, given we have a little bit, we have strong westerly flow traversing the Rockies here. So we'll watch for that in parts of eastern New Mexico. That may help to focus storm development later on across eastern New Mexico and into West Texas. But let's look at our surface pattern here, and we'll take a look at our surface map, our surface station plots here in a second. A little bit chaotic here. We can see maybe a little bit of a surface low down here near Fort Stockton, the Midland Odessa area. You can see that contour there. Broad sort of cyclonic flow down there. We have what appears to be some sort of frontal zone here that may be helping this thunderstorm complex continue this morning. You can see the kinks in the isobars here. That may be a frontal zone in here, maybe a warm front, maybe a cold front. A little bit hard to tell. Looks like some colder air has filtered in behind this baroclinic zone. Look at our surface map here. Let me refresh here. You can see temperatures are only in the 40s up here into the northern Texas panhandle and Oklahoma panhandle, so some much colder air filtering down in. So this has me wondering if this is maybe some sort of cold front here that maybe just kind of sitting there ready to surge a little bit farther south and help initiate storms this afternoon. You can see the wind shift here from our MCS, that kind of localized wind shift right there. So our MCS is right in there, central Oklahoma down through northern Texas. We may have this sort of baroclinic zone out to the west here. It's a little bit hard to tell. The main wind shift is going to be right in here. That may be where our front actually is. But it looks to me like this is some sort of cold front here that will continue to surge to the south a little bit today as that cold air filters down. And that is going to help initiate storms. We're going to get winds that are going to remain easterly behind this front. They may turn easterly behind this front. That will what we call upslope flow into the higher terrain here of eastern New Mexico and western Texas. So just that lift that results from these easterly winds riding up that higher terrain may initiate storms here in eastern New Mexico. That's that kind of western portion of that slight risk. We are expecting storms this afternoon across eastern New Mexico moving into West Texas. Some of the same areas that were impacted yesterday by storms out there. And then this actual baroclinic zone will foster renewed development this afternoon. Looks like the frontal forcing is fairly strong with this one, so should be a decent amount of storm coverage today along that frontal zone as it moves to the south a little bit throughout the afternoon hours. You can see that little bit of circulation here across West Texas, a little bit of a surface low maybe in there. As far as our dew points go, we have a nice moisture plume all the way up into southern Oklahoma, mid-60s dew points all the way up toward that I-35 corridor in southern Oklahoma. 60s dew points confined to the south of there, with 70s dew points there across south central Texas, the Austin, San Antonio area experiencing 70s dew points this morning. That may continue to filter northward a little bit as we go through the day. These kind of modest sort of southerly winds may keep that moist advection in place throughout the day today. So we do have nice moisture near the surface, a little bit different than what we saw yesterday. We were only seeing dew points in the mid 50s up out here in the target area for yesterday. Not going to be the case today, except maybe out here in that post-frontal upslope regime, where we may see mid 50s dew points out there. Let's go ahead and take a look at some soundings for this morning. So this is the 12Z 7 a.m. soundings. Oklahoma City did not release one. Norman did not release one this morning as the MCS was going through lots of rain at that time. So they chose not to release a balloon, but we do have one from Dallas-Fort Worth here. Interesting profile, very moist profile. You can see the difference between the green profile, which is the dew point temperature, and the red profile is the parcel temperature, the atmospheric temperature. Very, very small as you go up into the atmosphere, up to about 400 millibars. That means we have a very, very moist atmosphere today. So dealing with quite a bit of cloud cover, I would expect. Perhaps some low clouds as well as that moisture extends down near the surface, and we can see that. We've got quite a bit of cloud cover here across that Dallas-Fort Worth area where this sounding was released this morning. So lots of moisture in the atmosphere this morning. We do have some elevated instability, which is going to help foster and continue that MCS as it moves through the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area this morning. A little bit of elevated instability, so you might see some flashes of lightning and thunder this morning. The wind profile is a little bit wonky, but there is some warm advection ongoing. You can see the veering of the winds with height here in the low level. So low level warm advection is still ongoing here. And we do see some modest curvature here. And we'll see how this progresses throughout the day. If we do get kind of more surface cyclogenesis, that may help strengthen the winds at the surface, may help strengthen the low level shear. But then we'll have that frontal zone to deal with as well, where it may not matter as far as a tornado threat goes. We may see more of a damaging wind threat because of the strength of that frontal forcing will initiate lots of storms and turn things pretty quickly into a squall line, particularly for parts of North Texas, including the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. Let's go down south here. We'll take one at Del Rio and see what's going on there. Wonky wind profile here for sure. You can see steep lapse rates aloft still. That elevated mixed layer is still in place. We do see a little bit drier air here in the mid-levels at Del Rio. That may help foster a little bit more conditional instability this afternoon. A little bit steeper lapse rates aloft. So large hail is going to be a threat with storms that form out here in West Texas. Hence that kind of 30% hatched area for significant severe hail from that Midland-Odessa area toward Abilene this afternoon. Steep lapse rates aloft. Modest low-level shear is a good recipe for supercells with hail this afternoon. So you can see the deep layer shear is effective bulk shear at 56. So definitely shear is there. Deep layer shear is there for supercells this afternoon. Tornado threat is in question. Of course, just like yesterday, we saw that tornadoes can happen at any time, even when the overall threat may be low due to storm mergers, boundary interactions, etc. So tornado threat is probably going to remain low out here, but I think there is enough low-level shear for some embedded QLCS circulations, particularly up here toward the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. So we'll have to watch that carefully. But I think damaging winds are going to be the main threat today from these storms, just given the frontal forcing. And we'll take a look at that here now. We'll take a look at the 12Z NAM now. This is the morning run of the NAM, hot off the press. So this is at 500 millibars. You can see our trough, well-defined trough here. And as we go through the morning and afternoon, you can see it closes off there across eastern Colorado. We get a closed contour there, and it becomes more negatively tilted. The axis becomes more negatively tilted. If we go through time here, you can see that the axis is what we call kind of positively tilted. The axis kind of is right in here, tilting toward the right, a little bit positively tilted. But as we go through the morning and afternoon hours, it becomes more negatively tilted with time. You can see the main axis of that leans a little bit back toward the left. That means it's negatively tilted and a little bit more mature, a little bit stronger, a little bit more potent. Belt of flow, rounding the base of that trough, adequate for ample deep layer shear and large-scale synoptic scale lift for storm formation this afternoon. So getting storms is not going to be a problem. Storm coverage should be very widespread this afternoon. Just what types of storms are we going to see? We'll go down to 850 millibars, see what we can see here. So you can see that low-level jet remains this morning. Going to kind of move off to the east a little bit. Fairly weak low-level winds until about 0Z, 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time. And this may be convectively enhanced in here. This may be a result of the actual storms ongoing. But out here, we do have a nice swath of 30 plus knot low level jet out there across East Texas. Maybe a little bit difficult to sample that in the vicinity of these storms this afternoon. But I would expect there to be 30 plus knots or so of flow back out there toward north central Texas into central Texas. So low level shear may be on the margins for a tornado threat this afternoon. But we'll take a look at that here more in a second. And so here's our surface pattern. You can see that colder air filtering in behind. You can see that kind of frontal zone back here, that baroclinic zone, that temperature gradient right in there. That's that colder air that's trying to sink down and push this to the south. We do have kind of this sort of broad sort of cyclonic flow here. You can see maybe this sort of frontal zone in here, maybe this kind of warm frontal zone, kinks in the isobars. And actually let me zoom in here, give you a little bit better look at this. So the NAM is forecasting kind of this frontal zone here. We've got this sort of broad low in here across West Texas. Perhaps this warm frontal zone right here, the kinks in the isobars. Wind shift. This may be kind of that warm front, sort of cold front thing we were talking about this morning. Then we have our secondary sort of temperature gradient back in here. That colder air may begin to push to the south, and that may initiate storms as well as it pushes off to the south. This afternoon, you can see that it kind of surges as we go through the afternoon and evening hours there. So multiple sort of boundaries here. I think these will both be foci for severe storms back in here toward kind of northwest Texas. Our main band is going to be here across kind of the north central Texas to central Texas area. Both going to be favorable for storm formation this afternoon. And keep in mind the orientation of these boundaries, sort of southwest to northeast roughly. And let's go ahead and look at the bulk shear vectors here. So here is roughly our boundary. And you can see the shear vectors here are very much parallel to that boundary. Decent component that's parallel to that boundary. So given just the fact that they're surging pretty far to the south and that the overall shear vectors are very much parallel to the initiating boundary, tells me that it's going to be much more of a linear organization to the storms rather than a discrete storm mode today. And that's a good thing as far as the tornado threat goes. Of course, given the low-level shear here, and we'll take a look at a few soundings here. Just want to go back to the dew point here and show you kind of the moisture. And we'll take a couple soundings here. We'll go Dallas-Fort Worth. This is at 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time. We'll take one back here toward Abilene. Then we'll take one back out here in the post-frontal regime across eastern New Mexico. So this is Dallas-Fort Worth this afternoon. You can see very unstable, about 2,500 joules per kilogram of CAPE. Decent low-level moisture, 83 degrees surface temperature over 68-degree dew point. That's very, very favorable for severe weather. Overall photographs, not super favorable for tornadoes. Low-level shear is not super strong here, not a whole lot of curvature for any right-moving supercells to take advantage of there. Effective helicity, 156, is kind of on the margins for tornadoes. I would expect, again, to see more of a linear organization to the storms and therefore more of an embedded, brief QLCS sort of spin-up tornado threat as we go into the afternoon and evening hours. For places like the Dallas-Fort Worth Metro, the I-35 corridor down toward Waco and Austin this afternoon and evening. We'll go back out here to the west, and you can see that we're very unstable, but the wind profiles are quite wonky here. Just an overall sort of weird surface pattern. We're just, very kind of wonky out here. Not favorable for tornadoes at all. This may be, dealing with some sort of boundary. It's hard to say. A little bit of convection being modeled here, upward motion by the models here. This is back into New Mexico. So very unstable, very well mixed, 77 over 49 there. And a favorable hodograph for large hail. Would expect this to be very much a large hail threat with storms that can fire in eastern New Mexico moving into West Texas this afternoon. So again, going to see multiple areas of severe storms. Let's go ahead and go to 0Z. We'll take a look at Dallas-Fort Worth. I'm kind of focusing on this Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we'll go down toward Waco as well, because this is going to be our main line of storms. You can see not much changes in the hodograph. A little bit of curvature there in the low levels, so there is maybe a threat for some embedded spin-up tornadoes down there from Dallas down to that I-35 corridor toward Waco and Austin. But overall, a significant tornado threat I do not think is there today, but a few spin-up tornadoes definitely not out of the question there. You can see that those dew points surging to the south, that fine line surging south. That's going to be our kind of cold front back in there, surging to the south, undercutting any storms here, and perhaps negating the tornado threat with any storms out here across far west Texas early this evening. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. We'll take a look at the 12Z HRRR run. Again, this is just a best guess at what the radar is showing and what the radar might show this afternoon and evening. So we'll go through. This is the morning storms, huge collection of storms here across Oklahoma and North Texas this morning. So we'll go on with time. That MCS moves through this morning, Red River area. And by mid-afternoon or so, this is 20Z, 3 p.m. Central Daylight Time, we get storm formation here across West Texas, across kind of that baroclinic zone out there. Storms are going to fire. They may be discrete at first. HRRR is modeling some discrete storms out here at first. But again, I think the tornado threat is going to be minimal. The large hail threat is going to be most applicable to storms in the early life cycle before they congeal. You can see that upslope regime, storms firing in far eastern New Mexico, moving into far west Texas, places like that were impacted last night, places like Morton, Sudan, Leveland, Littlefield, etc. Places out there, Muleshoe, out there. You are under the gun for some perhaps storms with large hail and damaging winds this afternoon out there. Then you can see by late afternoon, early evening, storms are going to congeal into a line pretty quickly as they approach north central Texas and central Texas there. Places like Dallas, Fort Worth, timing is going to be interesting today. We're going to have to watch that. Looks maybe like 6 to 7 p.m. according to this model run, and could last for a decent bit. This looks like storms try to back build a little bit, start to bow out here across the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. Perhaps some very strong damaging winds in this kind of bow echo here. And again, I think that's going to be the major threat today, is going to be damaging winds. Large hail, of course, in the early life cycle, but then for most of the rest of the duration of the event, going to be a damaging wind threat, with the threat for a few embedded QLCS tornadoes. So places like Denton, Gainesville, Dallas-Fort Worth metro area, down to the south toward Waco. Timing probably anywhere from, I would say anywhere from 5 to 8 or 9 p.m. It's going to be the prime time for storms this afternoon and evening. Places farther to the south, places like Austin, San Antonio, you're going to be much later on, probably after 9 to 10 p.m. Damaging wind threat and an embedded QLCS tornado threat as well for you. And then we'll get just a big squall line rushing toward that Gulf Coast region. Houston, Galveston, Corpus Christi, Beaumont, Port Arthur, places along the coast, Port Aransas, going to be after midnight for you down there, but the storms will have a very damaging wind threat, very much a damaging wind threat, and an embedded tornado threat as well as they move off into the open waters of the Gulf by tomorrow morning. So that's basically what we've got here for today. Again, an enhanced risk is out for much of Texas. Again, Dallas-Fort Worth metro area, you are in the enhanced risk. All severe hazards on the table. I think going to be favoring mostly a damaging wind threat with a few embedded QLCS tornadoes possible. That is the same for places like Denton, Gainesville, Dallas-Fort Worth again, down toward Waco, Round Rock, Georgetown, and down toward Austin. Again, timing farther north, Dallas-Fort Worth, Denton, Gainesville, Waco. Your timing going to be basically 5 to 8 or 9 p.m., main time for storms for you. Farther south toward Austin and San Antonio, your prime time for storms going to be a little bit later, probably after 9 or 10 p.m. And then for the Gulf Coast, Houston, Galveston, Corpus Christi, Beaumont, your prime time for storms going to be well after midnight, it looks like, if that squall line does maintain itself toward the Gulf Coast areas. Mostly a damaging wind threat with southern extent, but a tornado threat cannot be ruled out with any embedded circulations. Back out to the west again. We've got mostly going to be a large hail threat and a damaging wind threat with storms that form in eastern New Mexico, moving off to the east. Places like Littlefield, Leveland, Muleshoe, Sudan, Morton, places like that going to be at risk for large hail damaging winds. Places into eastern New Mexico, far west Texas, maybe even toward the Lubbock area. With the large hail and damaging wind threat, initial storms, again, are going to have a large hail threat in the Midland and Abilene sort of corridor there before congealing into a line as they move toward that I-35 corridor into central Texas. So That's all we have for now. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.